So we've been, for the last, just today, I think, looking at each of the steps of the path in this packaging called the Lamrim, which is essentially taking all the main points of Buddha's teachings and putting them in this orderly way, according to experiential orderly, according to the capacity of the practitioner to internalize, just like any course. So we basically, it's being based on this text of this person called Atisha, who came to Tibet in the 11th century from India, and then put this kind of together, as a way of outlining all the main points of Buddha's teachings in an experiential way. It's so important that he do it this way. So he started with cobbling together this little contemplation to get us to be energized, not to waste this life, by thinking about, all these bullet points, thinking about these different points, about how fortunate we are. And the conclusion from this is, I must not waste it. I must take it for granted. When we enter into the first step, first stage of the Lamrim, the first part of the lowest scope of teachings, as they're called, or the junior school article, and here with all the extensive teachings of impermanence, Buddha's teachings, vast, on impermanence, gross impermanence, subtle impermanence. But he gets us on gross impermanence, very simple, but his agenda, like I've been saying, it was kind of agenda, The teaching is stated, but there's a purpose for it. And that is he gets us to think about impermanence in relation to death. So it's thinking about impermanence, realizing impermanence, which is the nature of everything that exists in our world, basically. But particularly to get a wake-up call. Increase our wish not to waste this life. Because definitely we will die, and we could die at any moment. Then he gets us to then contemplate, this is taking all the teachings of Buddha's on his view of the universe and different kinds of sentient beings. So in particular, he gets us to think about the suffering of the lower realms. Why? To increase our wish not to waste this life, because it's likely, given the way that we are, that they're the possibilities of rebirths could be one of these. So to think very sensibly of this type of consequence, and we think, I don't want that kind of rebirth, thank you very much. Which then gets us to think, well, whom can I turn to? Give me the method, so we take refuge in the Buddha, his Dharma, his Sangha, as we mentioned briefly. And then now we get to where we begin to practice. We take the medicine, we take the instructions. So we don't want to be born in the lower realms. We have this precious life, don't want to waste it, could die at any moment, could go to the lower realms, don't want that, rely upon the Buddha, and now we take his advice. And that is, abide by the laws of karma. That's the method. That's the fundamental method, the basic method, the foundation practice. And that basically means the checklist of 10 don'ts. Don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, don't badmouth, don't this, don't that. Basically, don't harm sentient beings. That's the basis. That's why. Because I don't want a suffering type of rebirth. So as we can see, all this kind of thinking is not what we're used to, not remotely. If we're Christian, yes, something similar. The fundamental difference here is it's not coming from God, and we're not sent anywhere. It's not anybody else's hands. We don't have to ask anybody to forgive us. No one's going to punish us or reward us. Buddha puts it in our hands. He says it's up to us. So it's a very different view that we need to cultivate, which takes time, because even if we don't have the Christian teaching, the instinctive materialist view is a victim, poor me, not fair, not my fault. So we hear it very much in the wrong way. So this really is the simplest level of practice. It already needs a lot of real clear thinking to internalize this, if we choose to. We're in the of us. So by abiding by the laws of karma, we are minimally ensuring that we don't create more negative karma. By refraining from killing, lying, stealing, etc., we're at least refraining from creating more negative karma. So watching our body and speech, a walk. This is practice. For my sake. No discussion of compassion yet. That's university. Got to look into ourselves first. So the other aspect of karma, of course, is we have to take care of all the karmic seeds that we've already planted, given that our mind is beginning with, according to the Buddha, given that every moment whatever we think, do and say will necessarily ripen in the future as our happiness or suffering, and given that we don't want suffering, we do want happiness, and given that we've had countless negative lives, or we've done countless negative things, it follows reasonably that we have countless negative seeds planted in our mind, so we better get ahead of the game. So the other thing we have to do with karma is do what we're doing here, purifying. Not just refraining from creating more, but get a handle, begin to purify, to weaken the karmic seed we've already planted so they don't ripen as future suffering. Two parts of it. It's a full-time job. If we lived a life like this, we would be the direct beneficiaries. Buddha says we can die with a happy mind. Because he says karma, remember, is a natural law. It wasn't revealed to him. He's not speculating. He didn't make it up. He has observed it like a proper scientist. He has observed it to be so, clearly with a subtle level of mind, obviously. It's not evident to the gross mind. Obviously through developing these profound, subtle levels of mind, he saw these things. This is the assumption here. So it's his experience. He's simply passing on his findings, and therefore his recommendations, his methods. So we can die with a happy mind, we can relax, which again is not how we think about life, past life, future life, even about happiness and suffering. It just seems to come randomly. We don't really know why things happen. We don't really know why bad things happen. We don't really know why good things happen. But on the other hand, the Buddha would say it's a natural law. There's logic to it, coherent. If it's a law, we can predict it and know it. Know it and predict it and be confident. Like any laws. It's how come we make things in our world where we know the laws of numbers, we know the laws of engineering, we know the laws of architecture, so we abide by them and we get our buildings and get our computers and houses every time. We know the laws of gardening, so we get our garden every time. Sure, other laws can intervene and make a mess, but given the laws, we know them, we're intelligent, and so we can have confidence in them. That is precisely the approach that the Buddha would take. So we can relax, calm our minds down, but we have to do it. Practice morality, don't harm others, and purify the karma we've already created. This is the first level of practice. Already profound, already amazing. If you did this, you'd already become an extraordinary person. So during your body, speech, and mind like this, you become an amazing human being. Everybody would adore you. You become very mature, grown up, responsible, self-respectful. Amazing, amazing. Just practicing meditation. Sounds so simple. Not even meditating, not even discussing that yet, not even going there yet. Just controlling your body, speech, and beginning to control the grosser levels of the delusion. We can do more. We can ensure we can get another decent rebirth, but we can do more. We can get to the root of suffering, the cause of it, the root cause. There are two main causes. As we know, the Four Noble Truths, as other packaging of Buddhist teachings. His first teaching that he gave after he got enlightened. And the second Noble Truth. He says there are two main causes of suffering. There are thousands of causes to produce anything. I mean, if you start to list all the things you have to put together just to have a flower, you'd have a book of items, causes and conditions you have to put together. So everything, as we know, being an impermanent phenomenon, being a compounded phenomenon, being a produced phenomenon, needs many things to come together to produce it. But we can, like for example, many things have to come together to produce a simple flower. But if you really had to learn everything, you could have, you have to learn many things, but you can narrow it down to the seed, soil, water, sun, and a bit of time. And the main cause is one. The way we talk, we're going to talk main cause and then secondary causes. Main causes and then conditions. The seed is the main cause, then you nurture it with the other things. Well, the way Buddha talks is the two main causes of our experiences. Both are inside ourselves, the main one. The external ones are, of course, they're real. They're secondary causes, though. They're only the catalysts. They're not the main things. And they're the only ones we know about. And they're the ones we point to. And that's why Buddha says we're not looking at the whole thing. So until we bring the mind in, we'll never, ever, 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 ever stop suffering. And both are in the mind. So as we know, Buddha calls it two. What he calls karma, what he calls delusion. What he means is karma meaning intention, the intentional action done in the past, motivated by a delusion. The thought, I will kill, motivated by a wish to harm, and then the doing of the action. That's a karma and delusion. The action, the motivation. Those two are the cause of all suffering. And they're both inside me. So it's like, again, putting us squarely in the centre of our own experiences. And you can extrapolate from this that this is exactly the same as happiness. There are two main causes, karma and virtue. An intentional action I will give, or an intentional action I will not kill, based upon, well, we could say even based upon not wanting to harm, based upon compassion. That's an amazingly virtuous action. Those are two main causes of my happiness. So given, so then, so in this high school, in the second scope, having harnessed the crazy energy of our body and speech and beginning to harness the energy of our mind, we can now go seriously into the job of getting to the root of the problem, which is in the mind also, is the deluded states of mind. In this mental consciousness of ours, learning to identify, which is the hardest job, and then distinguish between the non-virtue states of mind and the virtual states of mind, the deluded states of mind, the negative states of mind, the disturbing states of mind, the afflictive emotions. All these terms are synonymous. And all of these states of mind, remember, Buddha says, are adventitious. They are not integral to our being. This is a shocking, marvellous point Buddha says. We don't need them. They're extraneous. They cause intense suffering. They're like a nightmare. And we can rid our minds of them. And again, from his own direct experiences, he's found it to be so. And having done the job himself, of removing them from his mind and perfecting his mind and achieving perfection, achieving Buddhahood. This is what Buddha's saying. It's the point of all of it. So if that's true, we better learn to identify them. So the first step has to be, you have to learn about them. Someone says all the weeds are the problem in your garden. You can't just go rushing off pulling things out. You've got to know what a weed is first. You've got to know how to distinguish it from a herb and a flower. You can't just speculate. You have to first learn to know the theories. And Buddha's model of the mind is so precise, so distinct, so different from how we think. So we have to learn to know what are these negative states of mind, what are their characteristics, and how do they differ from virtues. And they're like chalk and cheese, utterly different. But the trouble is, when we start to look, it's extremely difficult because they're mixed together like water and milk. You can't tell one bit from another until we really start to learn to look deeply inside with much habit and much focus. First thing is learn the model of the mind. Mental consciousness, sensory consciousness. How the senses are alive, like dumb animals. The sensory consciousness is very, very limited in its capacity for cognition. Eye consciousness merely cognizes shape and colour. Ear consciousness merely cognizes sound. Touch consciousness merely cognizes rough and smooth. But look at the way we invest so much in our body, in our senses. As Rami says, we make the body the boss. Completely mistaken interpretation of the function of sensory consciousness. The mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is. All the thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, all the negative feelings, the positive feelings, the happiness, the sadness, all the coming imprints are there, all the tendencies are there. Everything is in the mental consciousness. This is where we have to do the work. This is where the workshop is. So you've got to learn to understand it properly. You can use Jung or Freud if you like, but, different discussion. We were talking Buddha's view. So we have to learn to distinguish between the virtue and the non-virtue. You also have to learn to relate, to get a sense, get an understanding of the relationship between emotion and these negative states, and indeed the virtuous states too. So, what we've been saying, all our feelings and emotions, which we think are so powerful, so meaningful, all the happy ones and the sad ones, we totally run our lives. We're so believing in there being feelings, emotions, and to say that they're based in thoughts sounds kind of like a cruel joke. Once we understand the relationship, it really makes sense to us. We can understand what we're doing. So right now, because we think of anger as a feeling, depression as a feeling, it seems impossible to think how we can rid it from our mind. I can't imagine how you do that. How do you completely rid a feeling from your mind? How do you stop your feelings? We can't even get our head around this. Then, of course, we're completely thrown by all the materialists, the Western scientific views that talk about depression as being a chemical imbalance. So we take our Prozac or our whatever, and we can see a result. So we assume that's lessening our depression. But it doesn't. Whatever Prozac's meant to do. I forget whatever it's meant to do, all these things you do. But the way it's like this. If you go to your Tibetan doctor, she'll feel your pulses, which is your physical being, your subtler physical energy. She won't call it chemical, she'll call it the winds and this and that. Have a different model. But she will be just the same as the Western doctor. She'll feel an imbalance of your physical energy. The wind energies are berserk, and that's affecting your mind. So then the consequence is like a lot of anxiety, for example. So she'll give you certain herbal medicines that will adjust the energy of the winds, and which, because those winds are inextricably linked to your mind, then that anxiety mind, which is connected to attachment, will calm down. Well, just the same, you take these certain chemicals, that'll affect your mind, because the way they say it in the West too, it's connected. But the Buddhist view is really simple. The mind, depression is the mind, as we've been talking. It's a state of aversion, internalized aversion, a build-up of thwarted attachment. It's not physical. In its nature, it is not physical. It is, in its nature, it's mind and its thoughts. Aversion thoughts. It's subtle, built up slowly, but subtle. Quick, sharp, subtle, instinctive almost, but build up until eventually there's so much stress and anxiety you can't bear it, or you want to kill yourself. It's mind. So because we don't have techniques in our materialist world, introspective techniques, to look into the mind, to go into it, something mysterious, but to really hear the thoughts beneath the emotions. Because we don't have those techniques, then we don't know how to notice what we're thinking until it's too late. We have to wait till it gets to the level of emotion. Then we realise something's going on. Then we better go to the therapist and get some chemicals before we kill ourselves or someone else. Or, unfortunately, we don't get to the therapist and we do kill somebody. because we don't know how to look into the mind beneath the emotions. So the emotions have an intimate relationship with the thoughts. So really the way to say it is that angry feelings which bring the body in hugely. Usually knee that's connected to the body. We feel it through our body. But angry feelings are just come from the habit of having these angry thoughts deep inside that have built up. Same as depression thoughts or jealous thoughts or attached thoughts. Because they work so subliminally, so instinctively, so intuitively, so quickly, millisecond by millisecond, they're rushing. All these thoughts are having their story. We don't notice it until it triggers the body and until it's habitual, and then we have a feeling. It's way too late. It's like you're driving on the freeway at 120 k's an hour. We say, what can I do when I'm angry? What can I do when I feel depressed? We wait until the extreme anger comes or the extreme depression. That's a bit like saying, I'm driving along the road at 120 k's an hour, I'm about to crash. What can I do? A bit late to ask. Too late. Damage control is the best you can do. Same with the mind. That's why we have to learn to know how to look into our mind well before it gets to the level of emotion. And that's where we do the fundamental changes. That's where we do the fundamental reconfiguring of our own mind itself. Actually changing our concepts. Actually slowly stopping the angry thoughts, the depressed thoughts. Literally changing our mind. Literally. The thoughts is what you change. You're reordering the story in your head. You're writing a new script. And slowly, you begin to buy into that script until eventually that becomes natural to you. That becomes who you really are when you practiced it. It just takes time. So subtle, so skillful. It takes such patience, such time, such clarity. It's a cognitive process, not just really. So when you've changed angry thoughts, lessened them, literally changed the way you interpret something, then of course you're not going to have angry thoughts, and of course you won't have angry feelings. Of course you won't. It's logical. So it takes time. Years and years. Be patient. Not to mention lifetime after lifetime. Because that's how deeply entrenched these misconceptions are. And this is the thing, the word misconception or the word delusion is exactly correct interpretation for the Buddha of these neuroses. Disturbing, we can see they're disturbing. Delusional, misconceptions, that's harder to see. It's not good abstract. This is exactly why they're called that. In other words, these delusions are out of sync with reality. That's their main function. They're buying into the lie of self-existent need and all the other nonsense. That's how they perpetuate something. So in high school we get to the root. We get to this, and we need concentration for this. We need the technique of how to focus the mind, but we need the skill to know how to interpret what we see with our focused mind. Not enough just to be mindful, to get focus. It's just completely ridiculous. You've got to have imbue it with intelligence, so you can interpret accurately what you're hearing, all your emotions, all your thoughts. And this is a daily struggle. Being your own therapist is a daily struggle. You're arguing with ego's entrenched views every single day. You're catching yourself, you're hearing the story, you argue with it. It takes time to change. It takes time. And this is just the beginning of the process. This is dealing with the branch delusions. There's still, until we get to emptiness, there's still the assumption of an I. And that's the final one that has to go. But at least from this so far, we get renunciation. These two paths, junior school, high school, together bring incredible renunciation. This incredibly brave, mature, grown-up attitude of accountability, knowing I'm sick of suffering, knowing exactly why I'm suffering, my own ridiculous karma, my own ridiculous belief, and totally, happily wanting to go beyond it, wanting to give up suffering and its causes. That's renunciation. Focused, reasonable, disciplined, intelligent thing to do. Takes time. It's easy to do. So from this we get amazing renunciation, which means you'll be less neurotic, more confident, more kind, more wise, less miserable, more brave in the face of dramas, so much more capable to be an amazing person. And we can keep going. If we graduated here, if we're on the Hinayana path, we graduate here, we would realize emptiness. We get to that, we perfect that realization, and then we're done, we're cooked. So we can do more. We can go to university. We can continue the exact same job, working on our mind, lessening the neuroses, but our emphasis is different. Like I've been saying, in the wisdom wing, our main emphasis is on me. Back off, mind your own business. Stop sticking your nose in other people's business. Stop interpreting. Stop analysing. Stop looking. Stop judging. Bring it back to me. Bring it back to me. The wisdom wing. Because you cannot lift a finger to help anybody else if you can't help yourself. And helping yourself means understanding yourself, using the Buddhist model of the mind and karma. That's your tools. And that gives you incredible insight into yourself. When I can understand myself, like we were talking before, but I really can deeply understand attachment. I can really understand the pedophile. I can really understand the psycho. When I understand rage and anger and neurosis and paranoia and arrogance, I can understand other people. This model of the mind refers to every single sentient being. I can also understand the lions and the dogs and the cats. This is the wisdom wing. Called wisdom wing not for nothing. Then I can get real, genuine compassion. Because compassion, as His Holiness says, you can't have compassion until you have renunciation. Or as he says, compassion is not enough. You've got to have the wisdom. Or as Namazopa says, meaning well is not enough. Because the wisdom wing is also the renunciation wing, if you like. You understand suffering and its causes and you want to go beyond it. Thus, we have less attachment, less neurosis, therefore more wisdom, necessarily. The more you get yourself out of the equation, the more you get your neuroses out of the equation, the more clearly you can see others. Because renunciation has two parts. One, I am sick of suffering. But two, I know now why I'm suffering. Karma and delusions. That's the basis of practice. When you have this, now your compassion can be valid. Because compassion's got exactly the same two. But the difference is the opposites of others. So one, you see their suffering. And you find it unbearable, sick of it, exhausting. But two, you know why they're suffering. Because of their karma and their delusion. And when you have this renunciation for yourself, it's like a sense of unbearableness of the pain, exhausted by it, just sick of it. And it's like disgusted by it, but not disgusted with yourself. Disgusted by this idiocy for so long that has caused you so much pain. So what comes from this is incredible courage and strength and self-respect. Then you can have enormous compassion for others, every single one of them. The worst pedophiles, the worst maniacs, the worst torturers, because they're so deluded, so profoundly ignorant, they think that what they're doing will be happy. And they're locked in this insane prison of their own crazy mind. Your heart will break for them. But not sentimental compassion. Or not just compassion for the victims, which is what we have now. I've got that. You can't have that until you have this for yourself. It's impossible. It's just impossible. It's just impossible. It's psychologically impossible. You've got to do it for yourself. You've got to do the wisdom. You've got to know your own mind. You've got to, deeply go into the revoltingness of the delusions and want to go beyond it, want to fix yourself up, have the courage to do so, then you can have faith. So continue on to the compassion wean. You just continue to work on the mind. No difference there. You can either rid the nonsense from your mind, but the reference point is different. The emphasis is different. Here, people are your weakness. So as we said, this particular approach, these 11 techniques, a combination of 2 different techniques, coming back to Shantideva India, starting with this fundamental view of equanimity, already itself so profound. Just from our discussion 2 days ago, we could see how difficult it is. Just to recognize the bare bones fact that every single sentient being, every enemy, every friend, and every stranger is the same as each other from the one point of view here, they wish to be happy. And you can say from their wish not to suffer. Because their wish to be happy, that's the basis of our wanting to be happy. As we move on, that's love. And their wish not to suffer is the basis of our compassion for them, which is the wish they don't suffer. So in other words, the logical basis for wanting someone to be happy, which is love, is that they want to be happy. The logical basis for wanting someone not to suffer is because they don't want to suffer. You can't hear this normally, because our basis now is attachment. I only want my friend not to suffer, and I only want to love my friend. We can afford to think sometimes of other people, but it doesn't come naturally. We only spontaneously have compassion and love for our friends because it's based on the wrong reason. The reason we use now is attachment. It's polluted, it's limited, it's not stable, it's got strings attached. That's why equanimity comes first, to shift the reason, the basis for why we want to slowly love all beings and have compassion for them. Because they want it. We have to see that first. It sounds so simple, but it's quite, it's a fine point, because they all are equal in wanting it. It never occurs to us to think of it this way, but it's something quite strong. All beings want to be happy, are driven second by second. All you have to do is look at yourself. This is an unchanging thing in our mind every second. We are yearning to be happy, constantly searching for happiness, always wanting it, always anticipating it, always hoping for it, and then freak when we don't get it. We all want to be happy. It drives every living being, almost instinctively. And all Buddha does is take this as a basis and says, you know what, folks, you can get it. That's the wisdom. That's the method. And now we're trying to see it for others, extend ourselves to others. All others, as insane as it sounds. The first step is to recognize that we're the same. All beings are the same in their wish to be happy. We have to break through all the illogic of our own neurosis, our attachment, our aversion, our ignorance. It sees them all as so different. What the Buddha would say, they've all been our friend countless times, they've been our enemy countless times, they've been strangers countless times. So there's not much logical reason to be partial just now. But find these logical reasons to break down egos and misconceptions, our narrow-mindedness. I mean, it's huge. Just this one alone, equanimity is huge. If we could just even see this one, it can transform our mind. Seeing the truth of it. Not discussing whether they deserve to be happy. That's not even the point here. That's how we talk in our dualistic view. They want it. That's our basis for our loving them, our wanting them to be happy, and our wanting them not to suffer. And as I said, the next sort of step we go to expand our mind insanely, to have this, this fact based upon Buddha's view that sentient beings are endless and beginningless and trillions of them. And it follows logically. We've all met each other countless times. So it follows logically. They've all been my mum. They've all taken care of me, loved me, nurtured me. That's the example here. He uses our point to try to want to repay that kindness. It's just a technique for the mind. So then we think of the kindness of the mother, the first one, which is can be a good point for us. to pick out, remember the things that, say, a person like a mother has done for us. Whether she's deluded or not is not the point. Well, we find hard to hear them. We're so kind of punitive. Our mother deserves our love if she's perfect. She's just like us, a neurotic person like us. Somehow we have this bizarre idea she should be perfect. It's most remarkable. Devastating when she does bad things. Like we spend our lives with a therapist to get over it. I mean, we're insane. You know? She's just like us. All that points out to us our massive expectations of attachment, isn't it? This mass, we come into this life with this gigantic expectation, which is part of attachment. But she better be perfect. You know? So just to point out all the good things she's done. And in fact, I think about my mum who gets depressed. I think I've got all the more reason to remember her kindness. Because it would have been extra hard for her to do it when you're depressed, isn't it? So just thinking of the kindness. And the second one, based upon interdependence, which is scientifically true, but it's hard just to hear it again. We don't think of it as kindness. So like I'm saying before, it's a very different interpretation of kindness here. It's what it means is, not that they from their own side are kind, not even from their side that they thought about us when they did it, when the people made the blue socks, or when the greedy marketing person chose the font. It's not a question of any of that. That's not the discussion. The bare bones point is, from my point of view, using this as a technique to open my heart to others, is to see the fact that every single thing that facilitates my life, my socks, my knickers, my clothing, my woolen thing, my glasses, my food, the building, the heating, the cushion, the seat, every single tiny thing that facilitates our lives is simply the handiwork of sentient beings. That's all the point is. Not that they're good, they're not good, they thought of us, they didn't think of us, they got money for it, they didn't get money. None of that's the issue. Not here. We're just simply extracting the fact that they did it. The fact that they did it, which is, how come I'm not sitting here naked? Because they did it. Okay, if you think about karma, then you did it. There's different slants on this stuff. When you want to think about karma, you remember how hard you worked to get this shawl, how hard you worked to have cushions and socks. That's another discussion. But here it's a different tack. We're taking the same facts of life, but seeing them from different perspectives to try to energize certain attitudes in the mind. So here we're trying to open our minds to others in ways we normally don't think. The fact is that everything in my life is made is the handiwork of sentient beings and the death of countless sentient beings. So we think of the food, we think of all these things. But the one I think is really good to think of is this body. One thing we'll think of as me and mine, absolute, is my body. Well, I'm sorry, it's not. It began with my mummy and daddy and the egg and sperm. And it zapped together. My mother and father. And then it went into my mother's body. And we know she must have nourished herself for all those, in my case, 7 months in the womb. All the stuff that she put into her mouth. No doubt she ate meat then, I don't know, the chickens and the fishes and the bulls and the veggies, which all the creatures have died for. All of this went into her mouth and came down and turned into, guess what? My body. So my body, when it came out, and now, 68 years later, is a mountain of fishes and a mountain of kangaroos, well, I mean kangaroos, a mountain of cows, whatever I've eaten, a mountain of chickens, the body of other sentient beings. It's a fact. You can't say it's not. Well, where's my body, excuse me? How kind all these creatures are. And all my mother's hard work and the blood in her body and all the air and the water, all the stuff that's nourished me since then. Where's my body? So when you hear this, because I'll never forget this one Curtis Senchab Rinpoche, one amazing Lama, Curtis Senchab Rinpoche, he said, I remember the words, for a certain level of bodhisattva, which we're going to talk about, the stages of development on the bodhisattva path, for a certain level of developed bodhisattva, and we'd have to deduce from what he just said, I'll tell you he said, that they've realised emptiness. They've gone beyond the I. And they develop very high levels of this bodhicitta based on love and compassion. Really, this stuff like a billion times multiplied. He said, for this bodhisattva, cutting their hand off and feeding a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. Now, clearly, in our ordinary world, of ordinary ego and ordinary people, that's an insane statement. There's no way we can comprehend that. But this is precisely what Buddha is saying. We are capable of accomplishing. And so that means it has to have been a realization of emptiness, which means going beyond the grasping of the inherent separate I. There has to be that. Because even huge compassion, unless the assumption of the I is gone, there's still the I being compassionate. So the action of cutting off his hand was as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. So the only way to describe that would be no longer a sense of I, neurotic I, and the development of phenomenal empathy with the suffering of others. Which when you hear the yogis talk, when I hear Lama Zopa Rinpoche talk, he's renowned for this extraordinary compassion. I can't even find the words for it. It's almost like horrifying to us in the West. We can't conceive of compassion with utterly egoless. We don't believe it's possible in our ordinary models of the mind, We just don't believe it's possible. It's hard to even conceive of, So the only way to understand it is at least learn theoretically the teachings of what you like at each stage and how you develop and how you'd be if you realised anything, how you'd be if you had no attachment, how you'd be if you had this. All laid out in Buddhist teachings. It's completely mind-boggling. It's inconceivable. It's not just some miracle. It's attainable by every one of us. So obviously, if there's a butcher shop around the corner, the idiot bodhisattva wouldn't have cut his hand off. He would have gone and bought a pound of meat. But it's obvious that the assumption here is there was no other meat available. You understand? You have to assume that. And so, because there's way beyond I, and this phenomenal compassion, just beyond imagination, compassion for the suffering of this creature. I mean, you see their own body. Oh, look at this, a few kilos of meat. Hey. And have the other one while you're at it. So in other words, you see, for us right now, if we can think of it this way, we think the body is some absolute thing that naturally feels pain. Not true. Pain, there would be an experience that bodhisattva the same. But this is where the mind is. This is the point about the mind. It's why we have such pain is because we had such primordial grasping of the I and attachment. This is literally the reason. Literally the reason. So the bodhisattva still has mind, a nervous system just like us. But because the mental state, not trying to say he's in some kind of samadhi, no, quite conscious. But because because the compassion in his mind was so huge that it completely dominated his mind. So there was only this empathy with the animal and the relief and the delight when he saw the starving animal, get some dinner. That was in his mind. So the only experiences we can have like this will be to think of a mother. You hear these amazing stories of what mothers do. I remember seeing a film years ago on the telly about what mothers do for their children. Run into burning houses, run back into the tsunami. I remember hearing one mother. Lama Zopa heard about that. He said, amazing. But it would have been even more amazing if she'd run back into the tsunami for a stranger. It's shocking, it's true. But what mothers do, because there is, first of all, because of this fierce identity with that person. Second, this massive attachment. And of course, enormous compassion. And so if that mother, maybe this particular mother, you hear about them, running into this burning house. For that moment, you could say there was no longer a thought of I, the neurotic I. Because if she'd stopped to think, I am running into a burning house, she would have paralyzed with fear. But all she could think of was her baby, isn't it? She was obsessed with the thought her baby was there. That's all she thought. And that dominated her mind. Well, that's what bodhisattvas are for everybody all the time. Not just for some. Not just every now and again. Hard to imagine. So there would have been a feeling there, but the compassion would have overrode everything else. So it doesn't matter, who cares? And this is eventually where we're heading to, the 11, the culmination of all these 11 techniques is this accomplishment of bodhicitta, but all these techniques are heading towards this incredible state of mind called exchanging self for others. This radical, outrageous, radical method of achieving compassion and love for others, which is the really advanced method for, which we'll go into more detail. We'll read some text, we'll read the 8 verses of mind training and different things that go through that the next few days. Because really the whole point of all the Buddhist path is the compassion wing. All the wisdom wings like preparing, getting us ready to do the real job of benefiting others, developing phenomenal capacity to benefit others. Interesting, isn't it? Wow, very interesting. Wow. So, equanimity, okay. Equanimity. Oh no, equanimity, then kindness, then all beings within my mum, kindness of the mum, kindness of all sentient beings. So 3A and 3B. That's what we got to last night. Now we're up to where we were last night. That's what we're up to in the class. So the next point on this is 11 little techniques. Now these people often meditate on these things for 20 years, countless years, to accomplish these step by step, going to deep meditation, analysing in many ways to trigger genuine insights into these genuine experiences of them. So eventually it grows and grows and grows, and eventually of course becomes natural. So the next one, the next technique, the next way to think is, of course, is a conclusion from this. I must repay their kindness. I must repay their kindness. It's a conclusion to come to. The next point, 4th point. I must repay their kindness. The more you think of the kindness of others, the more you think I must repay them. That's the conclusion. Not enough to say they're kind, but I'm not, the action point. The action point is I must repay their kindness. So then we begin, the next series of techniques is coming from a tradition called mind training, or in Tibetan, lojong. It's a whole genre of practices coming from the great Kadampa masters, who are the disciples of Atisha, which track themselves back to the teachings of Shantideva, which are these outrageous techniques that are unique to the Tibetan. Not unique, but are the main ones all the great beings in Tibet practice. These approaches, these radical approaches to achieving love and compassion. And then bodhicitta. This one of exchanging self for others, making this paradigm shift of exchanging self for others, learning to smash the main enemy, which they call on the bodhisattva path, this selfishness, putting me first, which is a consequence of ego grasping. That's seen as the enemy in this approach, the opposite to bodhicitta, putting. What we do is just instinctively, naturally, automatically put me first, which we think is totally, utterly normal. So it's outrageous. As Pavanga Rinpoche says, you need to be, like I mentioned, you need to be a suitable vessel to practice these approaches. Which means you need to have done some wisdom wing work on your own mind to really be ready and qualified. Because, for example, there's this, maybe it's in here. Maybe not. Anybody got a copy of the 8 verses? Do we know where one is, Al? Any books around here? Should we? In this book? Maybe it's in the Lavarian, taking refuge, prayers for teaching occasions. They listen to Lam-Rim prayers? I don't think so. Praises, everyday Dharma. Yeah, the one where is it? Oh, look at that. There we go, 161. Okay, good. That's the one I want. Just look at this one now. It's interesting. It's sort of from this whole approach, which is beginning now in these next series of techniques that culminate in this practice called Tonglen, giving, taking, which is the technique that's used to accomplish this, exchanging self for others. So, 161. No, it's not here. Oh, yes it is. It's here. Here it is. The actual practice. It's part of a bigger practice. They're not giving it a name. It's part of a bigger practice. Okay. All right. So we'll just go through these. Very fascinating. I'll not do this Vajrasattva tonight. I'm so sorry. We did one today, didn't we? We should do it tonight. You do it on your own later, okay? When you go to bed, you do your own trip. So we'll do this one now. This is the what they call the 8th verse. This fellow called Vajrasattva, back about the 12th century or something. He, one of the disciples, I think, of John Tompa or Atisha. Atisha is this one who wrote The Lamp of the Path. And then he sort of like renewed the really kind of strict monastic approach to life in Tibet. There were all these wild tantric yogis when he got there, you know. So he renewed this approach of strict morality and the keeping all the secret practices were so secret they didn't even wear their mala, you know. It used to be very open, so it was like degenerate times, I think he thought. So he started again this tradition, page 161, and it just says the actual practice, it doesn't say the title. We'll go into it, these 8 verses. But he really renewed this strict monasticism and really getting clear for people's minds with the Lam-Rim, these different levels of practice. So if you think of the monk and nun, or the Buddha, that's the first level of practice, junior school and high school. Buddha is the manifestation of that level of practice, which is called pratimoksha, or individual liberation, or getting your liberation, which is the practice of controlling the body, speech and mind. That's what the practice is, remember we're talking. That's manifested by Shakyamuni the monk. Then you've got the Bodhisattva wing, which is manifested by the Bodhisattva style, gorgeous, and that's coming from Tantra, which is all to do with energizing, which we'll talk about. Energizing the mind, because you're so advanced now, there's certain methods to use, and I'll explain. So that's manifested by these Buddhas looking gorgeous, you know. Manifestation of that path, which is from Tantra. But the Bodhisattva, so you've got the first level, you've got 3 sets of vows. The first one is the lay vows, which is pratimoksha, which is completely on what you show on the outside, which is behaviour. So the whole thing is emphasis on good behaviour. Good behaviour. Because that's what affects others. And there's a major commitment with all of us as practitioners to behave nicely. Then you've got the secret aspect, which is the Bodhisattva. Because in the first level of vows, you have a vow not to kill, not to lie, not to steal, not to harm, not to this, not to that. Simple, ordinary, back off and behave yourself nicely. The Bodhisattva vows are more advanced. They're vows not to do things as well, but you've even got a vow in there that says that if you don't break a pratimoksha vow for the sake of others, you break a Bodhisattva vow. You don't break a pratimoksha vow. So you have a vow where you can kill or lie or steal if it's truly motivated by bodhicitta, which means a really high being. So you break a bodhisattva vow if you didn't lie. Are you getting the point I'm saying? It's a more advanced level. That's like a secret level. So bodhisattvas kind of like are pretty outrageous already because they're highly advanced. They've probably got clairvoyance, they've got, depending on where you're at, emptiness, and your whole job is to benefit others. So you can do some weird, wacky things to benefit others, but your motivation is so stable, so perfect, that this overrides the first level, which is merely behaviour. Then you've got the secret, the outer, the inner, and the secret, and that's Tantra, the most advanced level. And those vows are like mainly technical, but they even supersede the Bodhisattva vow. So it's really like what Atisha did when he came along. He renewed and re-energized this really clear levels of teaching, which is the Lam-Rim that he's expressing. So it's very important to get this clear. And the Tantra is based upon Bodhisattva, and Bodhisattva is based upon Patimokkha. Just like you cannot go to university if you haven't been to high school, and you cannot go to high school without junior school. This is why we need to understand the levels and stages of practice. It's extremely important. So Atisha wrote that. So his students were like these great Kadampa masters, the ones who really practice in this way. And their main practice coming from Atisha, who got it from his main Lama, his Bodhicitta Lama, who was Selingpa, who lived in Indonesia. He travelled for 13 months on a boat or something in India to get to him, to spend years there, whatever, however long, taking these amazing teachings on bodhicitta, on tonglen, on exchanging self for others, that were seen as so outrageous, coming from Atisha, coming from Shantideva in the 8th century in India, that were seen as so outrageous, they were kept secret in Tibet, until eventually Dom Tompa and his students made them more public. And these are the lineage of teaching that have come all the way down from them to all the great lamas now, in all the traditions. They're all great practitioners of these amazing, outrageous, exchanging self for other practices. And this is one of these many seemingly simple, like all these texts written by Dom Tompa, by one of Dom Tompa's students, I think, Mangri Tompa. That's the name of our wisdom center. Mangri Tompa. It's great. Take this yogi. Huh? Huh? Yeah, the Brisbane Centre. Langri Tampa Centre. Oh, no. There's Karina, Hoppers, but in the Brisbane there's Langri Tampa Centre. Yeah. Okay, so these verses are so kind of, we'll just do a couple tonight, okay? They are, and I'll carry on with this final point, I'll kind of connect all those. But these verses, like all these verses, they're kind of nice and poetic and sound cute. As soon as you talk about emptiness, you kind of feel like intelligent, It'll squeeze your brain, have these deep analysis. But talk about bodhicitta and love just sounds wishy-washy until you really understand the level in which they're talking about them. So when you really analyse these approaches, when we'll break them down, they're shocking. They're not normal behaviour, I tell you. They're determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings. This sounds very peculiar, but it's this whole approach they have of relying upon, of needing suffering sentient beings. So taking the greatest possible benefit from sentient beings doesn't mean using them up. It means, given there are suffering sentient beings, the best way to take advantage of that is to use it as risk for the mill for you to develop compassion. That's the approach, that's the meaning. Often you see people translate it as for all sentient beings. It's wrong. It is from. That's this approach they have in Tibet. Who are more, it's so outrageous, it sounds so holy. All sentient beings who are more precious. I mean, who thinks sentient beings are precious? I'm sorry. Maybe your baby, maybe Harry. You understand? Isn't it? We have maybe one being we think is precious in our world, if we're lucky. I don't have any babies. I've never had no attachment to people. I mean, I think I must be, one of my sisters, when she was, I told you this, I don't know, when Judy was slightly a bit, one of my sisters, slightly a bit drunk, I don't get drunk much, she decided that I was borderline Asperger's. So, and the evidence is, I don't have anybody I'm very close to. I don't seem to need anybody. And on that basis, I'll probably join, Dalai Lama's Asperger's as well. I'm very happy to join the club, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know, who knows, I might be called whatever they mean by it. But it's interesting because, so precious. Who thinks of sentient beings as precious? I mean, when I hear Lama Zopa Rinpoche teach, isn't it true, Al? And isn't it true? He really believes sentient beings are precious because it's all he ever talks about, and it's not phony. And I hear it, and I can't put my head around it. I hear him. I know it's way over there in the future for me, but I like sentient beings. I'm quite happy with them. I like all crazy pigeons, and I don't mind crazy people, and I'm happy to go blah blah. But really, the way that he talks about I know there's nowhere near. And even since his stroke 2 years ago here, you can feel. Have you seen him since? No, you haven't. Have you seen him since? I don't know anything about Lama Zopa's mind. How can I possibly? But all I can say is it feels to me like he's just increased his compassion about 1,000,000 times more. Oh, there you go. Okay. It just feels like I can't even find the words for it now. It feels like even more compassion. It's hard to imagine. So it's just so high, so high. When I first heard these teachings about bodhicitta, and this just shows how long. I mean, I'm a nice person. I'm not sure I'm a nice person. I've got some calm to this past, so I'll plod along, you know. But I've been doing just to show. I've been doing it for 35, 36 years, and all I know is I don't feel that much closer to having more compassion, a bit less patience, a bit more patience, a bit less angry, a bit more enthusiasm. Do you understand what I mean? But 35 years later, I still am blown out by the way they talk about compassion. So it just shows how hard it is to go. But then I really thought these people were crazy. How can they say all this stuff with a straight face? About compassion. Wisdom I didn't mind. I liked emptiness. But this compassion, it blew my mind. I couldn't get a handle on it. But then I heard His Holiness say, if you want to benefit others, practice compassion. If you want to benefit yourself, practice compassion. And that gave me a connection. That gave me a hook. And they say he says, if you're going to be selfish, be wisely selfish. Practice compassion. And don't be all holy and say that's inferior. Sure, it's inferior, but get there somehow. Get a leg up on it, you know. And that for me was so helpful to hear. Got to start somewhere. And this is why you always, when you hear him giving the talks to politicians and countries, especially the States, he's always saying, if you're good to your neighbours, they'll be good to you. You can't sit there and be arrogant and drop bomb on them and get all kind of superior, you know. But it's the same thing. If you're going to be nice to people, that's the best way. And not in the needy way we do it, but seeing the benefit of being kind to others. You get everything you need if you be kind to others, you know. It's so simple. But it's just too much. It's so high. So these statements, who are more precious. Okay, wishful wearing jewels weird. We don't know about them. But there's meant to be a type of jewel that just gives you anything you want. And they're even more precious than this. It's like, excuse me? You know, excuse me? Already starting at the highest level. You already accomplished phenomenal compassion by now, it seems. Forget equanimity. All sentient beings are so precious. And that's the thing, those who are really high in compassion. I swear to you, this is exactly how they truly feel. Like a mother for her precious child. Oh, it's mind-blowing. I will hold them most dear at all times. I mean, it just makes you tired to think about it. You know how much effort it is to love one person and to have this amount of genuine emotion. I mean, it's just beyond ridiculous, you know. We all just say the words and just, okay, one day we'll get it. Huh? No. Love is the thought, may you be happy, and a delight in your happiness. That's love. And you grow and grow it. Compassion is, may you not suffer, and empathy with your suffering. So they're connected. You'll have one with the other, but they're both distinctly different. When you see Harry happy, you're delighted. When you see him suffer, you're pained. That's compassion and love. So they're distinctly different. You see? It's hard to use these two together, love and compassion. Kind of summarised, you know. You'll hold them most dear at all times. Already outrageous. The next one, they get worse as you go along. This one is over the top, insane. When in the company of others, I will always consider myself the lowest of all. I mean, if you haven't done any work on your own mind, and you're still a victim and self-piteous, you'll go, excuse me, mate, I already do that. What's the point here? You literally won't be able to hear it, and that's why you've got to be a suitable vessel. If you are really full of misery and low self-esteem, or somebody who's been abused by one of your people, you will not tell them to do this, believe me. It's just not, you're not ready for it. It's obvious, isn't it? Huh? Well, of course it is. But I'm saying, who can even do that? It's a dramatic way of being humble. See yourself as the lowest of all, dear. I get my point, Sarah. If you're still a misery guts, unhappy person who's miserable and low self-esteem, you can't do this. Wouldn't you agree? To give advice to somebody, see yourself as the lowest of all, is a bit too extreme for someone who already thinks they're horrible. That's all I'm trying to say. Can you hear my point, dear? Good. That's all. That's all. So you've got to be a suitable vessel here. But even worse, and from the depths of my heart, hold them as supreme. So what's this mean? Well, the best I can think of this one. Okay, my point about this one. The only person who's qualified to do that is the person who's got self-confidence. Put it that way. Do you understand my point? Who's got real self-confidence, who's really content with who they are, who's really happy in their own mind, which is a person who's given up an attachment and anger. So that's the point, isn't it? Who really is able to do that. So my feeling is a great way of practicing, beginning to practice this, because it's so dramatic, is, I think when we look into our minds when with people, friends even friends, your dear friend, and because we've got this natural tendency to criticize, to find fault. So I'm chatting away and I'm talking to my dear friend, let's say talking to my friend, what's her name, Rosetta, and she's telling me stories and I'm kind of thinking in my mind, as I'm smiling, God, she's talking a bit much tonight, Do you understand? Yeah. Or her lipstick's a bit red tonight, or she's getting a bit fat, or she's got more grey hair. We all the time, it's very embarrassing to see it, but because we're dualistic, because we see ourselves as separate, because we're very low tolerance for patience and real love and kindness, unless you're very special, we're doing it even to our friends, So for sure we're doing it to people we don't like, and if you bother to notice a stranger, you do it to them too, because this is what we do. It's so shocking. So my feeling is, when you're in a group, like you guys here, how long have you been? A few of you have been here a few days. And maybe even usually what happens in a group, like especially a very intense retreat, especially if you're talking all the time, in the end you've already divided them into friends, enemies and strangers. So in a week after the retreat, you won't remember 90% of the people. You won't remember the strangers, but you'll remember at least one person you couldn't stand and one person you like. Because this is how we are, human beings, with friends, enemies and strangers, right? So the thing is, my feeling is with a group, you really make, a good exercise in your own mind is you go around mentally each person, just in your mind, and you think of something about them that's better than you. But they've got cuter nose, or they're more intelligent, or they're thinner, or they've got, you understand, anything, because not everybody maybe, but I remember at school, you'd always notice this girl. I remember Annalise Chauffeur with her best hair, and someone else with a thin waist, and someone else with the best stockings, and you'd be jealous, or you'd be yearning, or, you understand what I'm saying. So and we're always finding fault, especially if we're the kind of person who always notices bodies and things. You notice the fat, the thin, the grey, the round, the square, the ugly. We just can't help it. All the time finding fault, judging, assessing, Now, I remember when I used to do karate, kung fu. I never admitted it then. I say it now. I was talking about probably in Queensland, my feet. I was really arrogant about my feet. I had really good kung fu feet. I mean sincerely arrogant. I really thought my feet were the best. Because they're short and kind of tough and good kung fu feet do a really good cut, a kick, And I've got some kind of attachment to my feet. It's true. Some people hate their feet. I think my feet are great, if I think about it. But then when I did kung fu, I was so attached to my feet, and I'd notice every feet. I would never say a word about the skinny long toes over there, funny old bony toe here. I'd notice feet. And I'd always compare naturally with my feet. Do you understand? Oh, thanks. I'm not a foot fetishist or anything. That was that part of myself that I was arrogant about, that I was comparing with others, Do you understand? You might think you've got better eyelashes, or longer, nicer earlobes, or always hair is sort of more curly, or your waist is nicer. Are you communicating with me? Yeah. Okay. So we just make an exercise in your mind. Even tonight when you go to bed, try to remember each person and think of one thing about them that's definitely better than you. It's a really good, humbling, wonderful exercise. Because we don't do it naturally. I don't think so. We might be we're prepared to be kind to each other and maybe even not say too much, but in the mind. I notice my mind all the time doing it. I remember they'll talk about bodhisattvas who actually would prefer to live with a person who doesn't like them than a person they love, they prefer to be, they're more kind to the ones they don't like. So I remember saying in one of the groups, we start purposely being kind to each other, we might get the message you think you don't like me, but you're making an effort to be kind, so don't start doing that. But really our minds are so tricky, so naughty, so dualistic, so critical. Yeah. You notice, Awareness of it and change it. Awareness of it and change it. That's the best. To change it is the point. But just awareness. But to change it, we can. Then think of something good, you know. At least we don't say it. Or we'll say it behind our back, though. I'll go home and I'll say to my sister, oh, that bloody Rosetta, you know, God, she's getting fat, did you notice? Or, she talks such a lot. This is our trouble. We'll be so nice to each other. And we can't wait, because we're so needy for someone else to know what I think. We'll run home to mummy or wife and so blah, blah. Isn't that what we do? When people have this why when you have friends and people at home. We call it sharing. Oh, God. Okay. So there you go. It's a good exercise. The next one, third one, even worse. I'll just do these briefly tonight and I'll go to bed early. 20 to 9, go to bed now. So this one is like hilarious. The moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I will confront and avert it without delay. Now the assumption there is that you've got the default mode is virtue, and every now and again a naughty thought pops up. I think it's the other way around, isn't it? So, I think the moment a virtue pops up, you rejoice. Because the default mode is delusion. I mean, you get my point. If you see a strong delusion, like it just says there, you see it, you avert it, you catch it. And that's where awareness comes in, that's where meditation comes in, that's where concentration comes in. That's where developing this marvellous skill to notice your thoughts, which is the job we absolutely have to do. And you get better and better and better and better at it. That's it. This is the job. And then not just that, but you've got the ability to discriminate. You're like a really skillful doctor. When they look at your cells, you can tell the cancer cell from the regular cell. Or if you're a really good gardener, you know from 100 feet away what a herb is or a weed. But if you don't have botany, you can't tell the difference, right? So you've got to have the skill to know what a delusion is and how it sounds, not to mention what it feels like, but how it sounds. In other words, you've got to recognise all these roommates in your head. There's so many thoughts in our head. You understand? And you have to be able to identify every single thought, exactly what it is. Is it deluded? Is it negative? Is it positive? What's it saying? And that's a real skill that we have to develop. Not just wait till your feelings come and then you have to unravel them, but see them as they're arising, and that's an amazing skill. And 99% we don't see because they're just swimming along unconsciously. Yes, tell me. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? I'm sorry. What do you mean by that? Seeing as you started, I can't just sit there and let you say what you want to say. You've got to analyse it. What are you saying, sweetheart? What does it mean by the delusion of the act of killing? What do you mean by that? I'm sorry. You mean the wish to kill? They're angry and they think I'm going to kill. So you understand what? Anger. So then? Yeah, that's ridiculous. It's good. I'm glad you understand. You have to understand. That's good. Good. I understand. I hear you, darling. Okay, perfect. So that's a good one. Do your best. Watch your mind and change it right there. And that is the point, because that's the point. Right now we don't notice our mind until it's full-blown eruption. So of course it's much harder to unpack it and unravel and go back and all the thought process. It's too late. It's Vesuvius has exploded. But if you catch it before it gets to the mouth, and you catch it as soon as you hear it arising, you're not blind to it, then you can change it easily, because it's not strong yet. Then you can change it easily. Well, that's the point. Damage control is the best you can do. It's too late. It's like getting the boiling point, isn't it? It's a bit late to stop it. You do your best, but this is where you've got to start with controlling the mouth first. Okay, so what do? Is you hear the story. You have to hear it and you argue with it. It's a conceptual story. It's an opinion. You did this and she did this and I'm going to do this and this. No, you argue with it. What do you mean she did this? What do you mean that? You argue with it. You have enough courage to argue with it until you've subdued it. It's like you're being its best friend. The virtuous thoughts in you are arguing with the non-virtuous thoughts. That's why you've got to have them developed. And it's just one thought in you arguing with another thought. That's what practice is. You see? But this is the point, especially when it's attachment or very strong anger. Attachment is the one that is like the spirit being pushed to do that thing. You run to it like a magnet, and even though your mind is already saying, I'm really not going to have a second piece of cake. And I'm talking about simple mind. Already it's too late. The energy just pushed you to the cake and it's in the mouth. And you're kind of watching yourself in amazement you did it yet again. This is the habits. That's right. It just shows how difficult it is, isn't it? That's the point. So slowly we keep practicing. What? What do you mean it's okay? John, you always want permission from somebody.
No, not that.
What?
That's the rabbiting on, right? But if we're fighting our thoughts, change.
What else would you do? You've lost me completely, John. What's he saying? What about them? What, darling? Yes, sweetheart, I understand. That's what practice is, changing your thoughts. No, you don't rabbit on, you use intelligent talk. No, you don't rabbit on, you use intelligent talk. What? No, I don't, John, darling, what? Please, I'll get upset. Be quiet. You can hear me building up. Okay. Whenever I see beings, this is all ridiculous words, who are wicked. Sounds so cute, you know. Just monsters. Evil. The pedophiles. You know. The ones we love to hate. The terrorists. The murderers. The guy in wherever it was who kept those women for 10 years. Or these pedophiles. All these people you think are just, we loathe them, the evil people, we hate them and love to hate them. These ones, who are overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering. Okay? I will hold such rare ones dear as if I had found a precious treasure. So what's the point here? Sounds perverted, doesn't it? We have to, the more we see our own delusions, the more we see the suffering they cause me, the more we can see the delusions of others, and the more we can see that that is why they're suffering, and that is why they harm others. You see, we're so full of anger and vindictiveness, and we're so full of wanting to find innocent victims who are the victims of monstrous, evil people. So we love to just see them as evil, close the door on them, hate them. But when we understand the delusions in our own mind, see, in other words, this is literally impossible to experience until you know your own mind. It's just impossible. Because we're full of anger, resentment, how dare, not fair, so we love to hate the evil people. And that's what we have to look at. So, of course, when you have these maniacs, we're so used to thinking compassion is something cute, or the poor thing can't help it. That's not the point at all. Compassion can be ruthless. So compassion mixed with wisdom means you see these pedophiles, whoever, you see the monstrous harm they do to others, but you know that the others created the cause, they were the monsters in the past, and you know this pedophile now is completely driven by his maniac mind, and your heart will break. Just like his mother would. The mother of those pedophiles, their heart would break. The mother would break because she knows that he's harming himself. So it takes time to see this because you understand. To hold them as most precious. It's like all of this is seeing sentient beings as grist for your mill. The more, like Yeshisopa said, bodhisattvas need their enemies. Because all this is seeing sentient beings, even the ones seeing them as kind, it's just using them as a tool to trigger my love and my compassion. It's just a tool that we're using. Do you understand this? This is the point. You'll act according to them, whatever they need. You might keep away from the maniacs. You're not going to go up and pat them on the head. You'll leave them alone. Or you'll put them in prison if it's necessary. But that's not the discussion here. It's seeing what it is that causes sentient beings to do the terrible, terrible, terrible things they do, which is delusion. Which is delusion. And the more you see your own, the more you see others, and that's the basis of why you have compassion for them. It takes time, obviously. Yeah, but you don't want them to be horrible. But you've got to notice them. You've got to notice them. I mean, if you're, this compassion, then let's say you're going to be a judge. You'll do what is necessary to put this person in prison. You won't sit there and say, oh, the poor thing can't help it, which is our naive view of compassion. Or because we assume if you have compassion, the poor thing can't help it somehow. Or they're a victim. Compassion for us is only for victims. But this compassion is based upon understanding what causes suffering. So, of course, you have to know. That's why the wisdom wing, you've got to go to the mountains, mind your own business, and get into your own mind. Now you come down and you come into the world where sentient beings are. Because they're the gristful you're doing now. To energize your compassion. Your wisdom will continue to grow and you'll do whatever's necessary. If you had to have hands-on dealing with those people, you'll do whatever you have to do. But you'll have immense compassion for them because you know why they're doing it. And because this is a simple fact, and you look at your own life, if any one of us has ever harmed another, and we all have, had fights, been mean, why do you think we did it? Because of our hurt and our attachment and our anger and our jealousy and our depression. Well, that's it. That's why people harm each other. So when you see the underlying cause, which is insane delusions, that's what causes you suffering, and that is why you harm others. Bodhisattvas even have such compassion for the harmers because they realize they harmed them in the past and they actually almost see themselves as a cooperative cause for why this person is harming now, and they take responsibility. It's heartbreaking. Do you understand? These young nuns I mentioned, in 2003, Bishop Gear invited all these ex-prisoners, about 20 ex-prisoners in New York, all of them been doing Buddhist stuff in prison, and they invited people like me because I've been working with people in prison. And they had a really amazing day together, these 20 guys, 20 people, black, white, male, female, Puerto Rican, Mexican, all been in prison, done some kind of meditation in prison. And they all talk about the suffering, all the dramas, all the sexism, the racism, the this, the that. And then they invited 2 young Tibetan nuns to come and give a talk about their suffering. Young women, nuns, tortured and sexually abused in prison for a couple of years. And it was I think I mentioned this, it was so interesting to hear them talk. First they were very quiet, with tears coming, very humble, explaining their suffering. And what was evident, I think, to everybody in that room, all the Westerners, that they weren't angry. And that's shocking to us. We don't understand it. They didn't have anger. And their suffering was obviously worse than everybody else's. And at the end, as I said, I told you, they spoke quietly with tears, quietly said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we realised that we harmed them in the past. And so the Bodhisattva would actually not just feel, well, I created the cause to have this happen to me, but they would feel so pained that by their harming them in the past, this has now caused them to harm them. They feel responsible for it. Now that's something interesting I've just noticed for myself. I must say something. I'll just say it. I see, let's say, no, never mind, just that point. I think it's time to go to bed. Okay. So, food for thought here. This is all part of the Bodhisattva path which we're moving into. And the next series of steps are all about this approach, heading to the ninth technique, which is where we actually practice Tong Lem, which also happens to be, which comes from this verse, the 8th verse. The 7th verse is Tong Lem. And this practice has come out of this little text, which has been practiced for the last 1,000 years by the Tibetans. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. So, all this food for thought, all this thinking, this analysing, this assessing, this purifying, understanding, aspiring, how amazing, how marvellous, all this gardening we're doing. So we delight in all this, and we sing public prayers to rejoice in it and dedicate. So the dedication prayers are the red one. We'll just do the first couple, maybe 3 or something, might be 3 tonight. Start getting holy. Okay, we'll do the one on the left as well. Okay. Gewajin yududar lama sange drugyune drovachikyan malupa deisala kurpasho. Now the next one on the number 2 and the one on the left there in English. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, means in the minds of beings. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness that has not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish and increase more and more. I mean, maybe we can also sing page 244. The 2 long life prayers, one for Lama Zopa Rinpoche and one for his Holy Lama. And any other lamas we have, we think may they live long because we need them badly on this earth. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honouring the 3 jewels, Saviour of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And all the holy beings that I think of. And may we live long so that we can continue to practice virtue to become a Buddha. As Lama Zopa says, if you're not going to practice virtue, you might as well not live long. You just waste your life. You might as well die now. He didn't quite say that, but it's a good point. Okay, people, retreat mode. Go to sleep into emptiness on your pillow. You want to go to sleep with Vajrasattva on your pillow. You dissolve into emptiness, dissolve until you go through the 8 stages of death. And then when you dream, maybe don't keep Jane awake tonight, okay? Maybe you better have a different kind of dream. Okay? The latest scenario. Okay. So do what you can with your dreams, all right? Okay. Good night, and thank you. All right.